So there's some huge AI news today, and one of the things that I personally am very thankful for is that OpenAI, they have a sense of humor. They like trolling people. The internal OpenAI drama is the stuff of legend, and the last few days was no exception. So a few days ago, Sam Altman comes out with this. Learning how to say something in 30 seconds that takes most people 5 minutes is a big unlock. 3.4 million views, 26,000 likes. We tend to hang on his every word. He continues, and in my ability, a surprisingly learnable skill. If you struggle with this, consider asking a friend who is good at it to listen to you say something and then rephrase it back to you as concisely as they can a few dozen times. I have seen this work really well. Now, when he's saying have a friend rephrase it back to you, a few dozen times, so we're talking about 24 times, 36 times, a few dozen. Can you imagine what that conversation would look like? But with that said, we've seen tons of research showing kind of what he's talking about here, but with language models, taking outputs from a smarter model that's good at something, whether that's condensing information or applying certain logical steps, and then training the smaller model on that works surprisingly well. This was kind of the idea behind Orca 2, teaching small language models how to reason. It was a while since I read the paper. We covered this on this channel, so I apologize if I forget some details, but if I recall correctly, they took GPT-4 and they had it produce a bunch of text. Specifically, it was about certain reasoning abilities. One example I recall is there was a short story that was cut up into 4 pieces and then jumbled up, and you're supposed to figure out the logical order of it, right? It was something along the lines of there's a lady who's upset. There's a police officer who's writing a ticket. Then there's a car crash. So there's kind of these few things with some details thrown in. You're supposed to organize it by how that would have logically happened, like what the correct timeline was. And GPT-4 was able to do it very effectively. So they took the outputs of GPT-4, where it thinks through the reasons to the problem, and then they feed it to this much smaller model, right? So Orca 2 is trained with an expanded, highly tailored synthetic data set. This is Microsoft, by the way. So you can imagine that they have really close access to GPT-4. And so what was the result of that? Well, Orca attains performance levels similar to or better than models that are 5 to 10 times larger. Llama 3 recently dropped. It was very impressive. The big model, the 400 billion plus, is still training. So GPT-4 is like 3 or 4 times larger than the 400 billion Llama 3 model. But the medium-sized Llama 3 model, 7 billion parameters, is really good on par with GPT-4. So why is this important? What's the point? And the point is, on April 28th, Sam Altman is talking about something that, at face value, I don't think really makes sense. This idea of a friend of yours repeating something back to you dozens and dozens of times. I don't think is a real scenario. However, it does make sense if you think about training smaller models with synthetic data, which, by the way, Mark Zuckerberg recently released Llama 3, was talking about on various podcasts, talking about how there's this more blurred lines between training and inference, because as you run inference, as you get the data out of the model, that's also used for training. That synthetic model is used for training. And small, capable models are what we think is the output. But later, this happens. Less than 24 hours ago, a mysterious new model called GPT-2-chatbot, LMSys, so that's the website that has the chatbot arena, the chatbot leaderboards, etc. And this model, GPT-2, notice GPT-2, not GPT-2, right? GPT-2 has appeared on the LM arena, and it's really good. Not only does it seem to show incredible reasoning, but it also gets notoriously challenging AI questions right, with a much more impressive tone. Judge for yourself. Here's the notorious, what weighs more, a kilo of feather or a kilo of lead? The model nails it. They both weigh 1 kilogram, but also specifies why people get this wrong. The difference is the volume, how big it is, right? But in terms of weight, kilo is a kilo. Andrew Gao, we introduced him, I think it was a month ago or so, and now it appears he's a recurring character on the show. He's saying, GPT-2 chatbot just solved an international math Olympiad problem in 1 shot. The IMO is insanely hard, the Olympiad, the math competition. Only the 4 best math students in the USA get to compete. There's that answer by GPT-2. Now, one interesting thing Andrew points out is this. Is this GPT-2 chatbot, is it tuned for agentic capabilities? So take a look at this. So it's responding, we can't see the question, but the response is to successfully purchase green Nike sneakers online for a user, an agent would need to follow these detailed steps. I'm not going to read the steps, but notice how well it kind of chunks all the actions down into sub-steps. There's the preparation phase, the search phase, the evaluation phase. I mean, that's certainly a good way of thinking about it. Next, we break it down into understanding user preferences, like what's the style, what's the budget, setting up tools and accounts. This is big. This really jumps out at me. And I got to agree with Andrew here. By the way, just so you understand what we're comparing it to, here's the ChatGPT response. Here's a step-by-step plan for an agent to purchase green Nike sneakers online for the user, right? Begin by searching for green Nike sneakers. I mean, it's okay, but obviously the GPT-2, this is some next level stuff, right? Because look how it's setting up the tools and accounts. Ensure you have access to reliable internet connections. Make sure you have the suitable device. Do you need certain accounts set up, whether that's Amazon or Nike or eBay? Ensure payment methods are ready and verified. Trying a lot of these things that are agents, whether that's multi-on, hyperwrite AI, etc. As I'm looking at this, I feel this step would have prevented some of the issues that those models run into, right? Because they go and they start, they go on Amazon, they start clicking around, but they don't ask things like, am I logged in or not, right? That, of course, would create very different sort of paths or sets of options that you can do. Having the agent think, okay, I'm shopping on Amazon. Am I logged into Amazon or not? That'll be helpful for future reasoning. Kind of blowing my mind here how good this is. They're thinking about the various websites you can use, Nike, Amazon, Foot Locker, Zappos. And then the evaluation phase, we're looking at customer reviews. We're looking at the return policy. So much of what goes into reasoning for these AI models is being able to write out the tokens, the words, right? If you tell it step by step or think through this, by this point, I'm sure everyone's aware that chain of thought leads to better results. It thinking through things and kind of showing its work, thinking out loud, whatever you want to call that, makes its reasoning better. Well, this seems like really good, showing its work for preparing to do this purchase of Nike sneakers. It's meticulous. It continues here, the purchase phase, post-purchase, like confirmation and tracking. So it seems pretty obvious that GPT-2, and this is important because again, a lot of this is obviously rumors. We don't know what GPT-2 is. No one's officially confirmed anything, but we know that we're expecting something with the next generation models out of OpenAI. We believe, based on the rumors and things that people have said, that we believe them to be more agentic, more capable of, you tell them to go buy shoes and they're able to kind of autonomously execute that and figure all this stuff out. And certainly it seems like it's been trained for that. This doesn't look random. By the way, here's our screen recording of, I had a chance yesterday to jump in and mess around with this GPT-2. I asked it to create a snake game. So take a look at this output that it did here. Notice how it's breaking it down by categories. So it's going, import libraries, initiate Pygame and set up the display, right? Just look at the output here. That is very, very detailed. And unfortunately, it looks like it cut off here. There's a limit to how much the outputs can be, I guess, in the chat arena. So I think I just ran out of space here because this was quite a bit of code that it put out. But man, it looked better than a lot of the other stuff. So I want to play with it a little bit more. But based on just this one thing, I got to say my first encounter with it I was impressed. Someone on Reddit claiming that they're able to get the system prompt out of GPT-2 could be hallucination. We've seen some weirdness before with it thinking, God knows what. There's a number of scenarios where it was saying something random. So take this with a grain of salt, but it looks like in this case, it's saying, oh, this is personality V2. Here's a little math problem where you're asking it to respond with just a numerical answer, and it does. It just says 11, which I really haven't seen GPT-4 do this. I don't know if I've ever seen it. Usually it'd be like, oh, sure, here, you just want the answer, or here's the answer. And then it says the answer. It won't just, I don't think I've ever seen it respond with two characters. There have been rumors that something in development is it having invisible thoughts or a scratch paper. So there's the output, but there's something also running on the side where it can kind of think to itself that the user doesn't see, but it still allows it to reason and process. And then here's just the output. It's also really good at ASCII arts. So here's a unicorn. So this is Llama 3, the 7 billion instruct. So it's the chat bot version. So this is the thing that a lot of people are very excited about, myself in particular, because it's really good. It's open source. You can run it on your computer. You need a beast machine, but consumer grade hardware. And here's its idea of a unicorn. And here's this GPT-2. I gotta say that's a unicorn. That's a legit unicorn. Now, some people do mention that it's probably just recalling images from the internet. So here's art by Colin J. Randall. And here's the unicorn from GPT-2. Certainly seems like a one-to-one copy of it. And Chase is saying, I can confirm GPT-2 chatbot is definitely better at complex code manipulation tasks than Claude Opus or the latest GPT-4. Did better on all the coding prompts we used to test new models. So what is GPT-2? Who made this? Well, Mr. Sam Altman himself, again, saying, I do have a soft spot for GPT-2. Now, one interesting thing about this tweet is that it was edited. As Jimmy Apples points out, I do have a soft spot for GPT-2 was initially written as GPT-2, and Sam Altman specifically went back, edited the tweet to delete the dash to make it, I have a soft spot for GPT-2. This entire screen is a really good summary for why I love OpenAI, how much trouble they go through to kind of do this playful trolling of the people following them. I gotta say, I'm just a little bit happy it's not some big faceless, humorless corporation that's developing AI, AGI behind closed doors. This is Sam Altman team with his cryptic tweets and alt accounts making sure that you and I are entertained. I guess either entertained or scared, because some people are passing bills or attempting to pass bills that would put laws into effect that would limit capability. This one specifically is talking about open source. So Hinton and Bengio, two big, well-respected, well-known researchers, have been in the space, of course, for a long, long time. Here's their takes on this bill. Now, this is a California bill. So California wants to be at the forefront of regulating everyone. Sorry, I misread that. California wants to be at the forefront of responsible innovation in artificial intelligence. Now, Hinton says SB 1047 takes a very sensible approach. I'm still passionate about the potential for AI to save lives through improvements in science and medicine, but it's critical that we have legislation with real teeth to address the risks. And Bengio saying AI systems beyond a certain level of capability can pose meaningful risks to democracies and public safety. Therefore, they should be properly tested and subject to appropriate safety measures. This bill offers a practical approach to accomplishing this and is a major step towards the requirements that I've recommended to legislators. Now, there's a lot of pushback against this bill. Jeremy Howard is saying this could do a great deal of harm to startups, American innovation, open source, and safety. We're saying this is serious big tech lobbying. They should just rename it to How to Kill AI Startups and Open Source. And Brian Shao is saying the California Senate bill to crush OpenAI's competitors is fast-tracked for a vote. This is the most brazen attempt to hurt startups and open source yet. Now, I gotta say here that obviously this is under debate. Different people have very different opinions. We just heard from Bengio and Hinton, who are very happy with this bill. There are others who are very unhappy. So I'm doing my best to cover kind of both sides of the argument here. So this is one of the sides saying that it's bad. So here they're taking aim at a model that's, let's say GPT-5 is mildly better than GPT-4. Models at this level will be covered by this bill. He's saying they are trying to sneak in a new AI regulatory agency like the TSA or Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The primary function will be to harm small players in the AI industry. So they would create a frontier model division. But this is where it gets pivotal. This is where kind of everything hinges on this, right? So when we're talking about derivative models, right? So the derivative model clause is crucial. It de facto criminalizes open source. So if somebody puts out an open source model, which Elon Musk did, which Mark Zuckerberg did, fairly powerful models. And let's say somebody takes that model and either uses the unmodified copy of artificial intelligence of that AI model or modifies it or uses that model with other software, right? That's under this derivative model. However, it says derivative model does not include an entirely independently trained artificial intelligence model. How this whole thing gets handled is extremely, extremely important because little words that are used in here can drastically change what isn't allowed. It seems like they're saying that it's not an entirely independently trained artificial intelligence model. So that's good, right? So if they take something like Llama 3 and use that as the basis for training a different model, then, Facebook, Meta, they won't be affected. This is a little bit concerning. A combination of artificial intelligence model with other software, right? So Brian Shao is saying, let's be clear about what this means. If your AI writes perfectly legitimate emails and a malicious actor makes a derivative model by attaching it to malware, then the Frontier Model Division, this new acronym from the government, they'll have to remember that department will target you, possibly with a felony. And so from this little pamphlet here, so covered risks, cyber attacks causing over 500 million in damage, autonomously executing crime causing over 500 million damage, creation of a novel chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapon using AI. So it sounds like if we take something like Llama 3, an open source model, and we figure out how to use it with, malware that autonomously executes crime causing over 500 million damage, right? So let's say it hits some publicly traded company, burns down their data centers, erases everything, causes, a lot. That's a lot of money in damage as well. Then the original model, right? Llama 3, Meta, they could be liable for that. And again, take this with a grain of salt. Once we have more information, once people discuss this, we'll probably have a better idea of what this does or does not mean. Me personally, I like open source. I'm rooting for open source. With that said, I tend to be a fairly positive and optimistic individual. So I'm glad that there's people that are worried about potential harms and working to address those harms. And my greater point here is that we just have to be careful that we're doing this because of real risks and not to just push the smaller players out. Here's Senator Scott Wiener, and he's responding to Brian Chow. So just kind of like what we just read, he's saying AI policy is a new and fast-moving field. So he's the person behind that bill. And he's saying, so this is a fast-moving field. It's healthy and important to have a diversity of perspectives. However, this thread contains some extreme inaccuracies, and he kind of corrects some of it. So there's some word salad here, but here are the important parts. So yes, they did get support from the godfathers of AI, Jeffrey Hinton, Yoshua Bengio. Those people are legit. This is funny, Senator. If somebody creates a ransomware that caused $1 billion of damage using Microsoft Visual Studio, are you going to be suing the developers of Microsoft Visual Studio? This whole bill reads like NIMBY for AI. So NIMBY not in my backyard, basically preventing new buildings from going up next to where you live. So that idea that this would make it a felony to make a paperwork mistake for the agency is false. So basically he's saying, like with any paperwork that you're submitting to government, if you knowingly lie, yeah, you could get in trouble. And this is no different. I think that makes sense. I'm not too familiar with this deep legislational intricacies, but certainly that seems to make sense. It seems like that applies to most things we do as individuals or not. Like if I knowingly lie on my taxes, I can get in trouble for that. And he's saying that the AG, Attorney General, would hold the developer accountable. if the model can cause catastrophic harm, at least 500 million, and liability isn't automatically triggered by harm, even if it's catastrophic harm, it only applies if the developer unreasonably fails to test and mitigate the catastrophic risks of the model. If this is true, then I guess that's reasonable, right? But again, the developer unreasonably failing to mitigate the catastrophic risks, if that can refer to just open sourcing the weights, the code and the weights of the model, that maybe seems like a little bit like of an overreach. Again, that's like the Visual Studio Basic causing 500 million of damage and going after, Microsoft for it. But if it's the case of where they fail to do some basic testing and release something that just goes out and does massive damage, catastrophic damage, then certainly it makes sense that this makes sense. And also Senator Scott Wiener corrects the previous thread saying these are civil sanctions, not criminal liability, right? So this is in response to saying that this bill de facto criminalizes open source. So again, if somebody open sources their model, check it in any way, shape, or form, then releases it, then somebody uses it to do 500 million of damage, then those people would have civil sanctions. They wouldn't go to jail. But people are calling BS. They're saying Jan LeCun doesn't agree with that. No one's heard of these labs. Yeah, because he starts out with, well, here's some people that agree with me. And it's like, I skipped reading that, but it's like, I don't know who these people are. And this person says, glad I don't live in California, lol, which is the really interesting thing here, the other big thing to talk about. How is California legislation affecting everybody else? Is this legislating what the model is? Where's the model? Is it on a computer in a certain state? Is it in the cloud? How do you even begin to think about that? Where is the model located just physically in the world? If you're using a computer center in Europe and then doing the nefarious stuff in the US and California, does that count? Or does the model have to be physically located in California? If you're using cloud services, you might not know where the data center is. How do you even begin thinking about that? Or is it literally if you do 500 million of damage in California, then this gets triggered? In related news, this is Dr. Techlash on Twitter X. I think we read some things by her before this. So she's saying effective altruism bait and switch from global poverty to AI doomerism. The effective altruism founders plan from day one to mislead donors and new members in order to build the movement's brand and community. So it looks like this is Eliza Yudkowsky, and this is a little bit troubling. So there's some quotes here that are attributed to him. And again, take some of the stuff with a grain of salt. Obviously, I always say that. But also, as we've covered on this channel, a lot of things that relate to effective altruism, they're very shady. You can't ever know what's actually going on. They seem to have kind of their own goals that they don't share with anybody else, kind of cloak and dagger stuff. So he's saying, I regard the non-X-risk parts of EA. So EA, right, was supposedly for improving humanity for the long term, helping people in Africa, helping kids not be hungry, just improving humanity in the long term. And he's saying that everything besides, us protecting ourselves from AI risk, all the other parts are only important insofar as they raise visibility for the organization and eventually get more people involved in, as I would put it, the actual plot. So again, she's saying here the bait and switch. And certainly, if this is true, that would be kind of a great way to say that. The bait is, hey, we're going to help feed hungry people. But once you're in, the actual plot is shut down AI development. And so Eliza Yudkowsky, as I've said repeatedly, X-Risk cannot be the public face of EA. OPP can't be the public face of EA. So OPP is something that I think they use internally. I can't figure it out. If you know, please let me know in the comments. I only know slang versions of that, but they're saying animal altruism can't be the public face of EA. Only sending money to Africa is immediately comprehensible as good. And only an immediately comprehensible good can make up for the terrible PR profile of maximization or cause neutrality. And putting AI in there is just shooting yourself in the foot. So this, if true, to me is very annoying because they're literally, to me, it seems like they're saying we care about these weird or whatever, certain causes that other people don't care about. So we're going to lie to them and tell them that we care about these causes that are perceived as good, right? We're going to call it effective altruism. And this seems to be kind of a common theme of using these big words that everybody can agree on to mask some really shady stuff. So call an organization, good for everyone. And then, do horrible crap, because who would argue with an organization that's called good for everyone? Speaking of which, I'm starting an organization called Don't Kick Puppies. Please donate today. What's our actual mission? You won't know until it's too late. And Dr. Techlash continues here, the public-facing discourse of giving to the poor was a mirage designed to get people into the effective altruism EA movement and then lead them to the core EA, right? X-Risk, which is discussed in inward-facing spaces, right? So here they're talking about how to kind of lead people down that path. So insofar as newcomers, new effective altruists tend to start off concerned about global poverty or animal suffering, and then here take seriously and often are convinced by the arguments for existential risk mitigation. So here they're basically saying, how do we we're telling them the truth, would that lower our donations, is basically what it's saying. And if so, how do we not tell them the truth so we can keep getting donations? And here's the EA founder. So he's saying that alleviating global poverty is dwarfed by existential risk mitigation, right? So we say global poverty is the cause, collect money, and then who cares about global poverty? We need to shut down AI, but we're not going to tell that to the people that are giving the money to this cause. So the guidance to promote the publicly facing cause of global poverty and keep quiet about the core cause, AI X risk. There are certain things in the EA community that could be turn off for some people. Things like cryonics. This is cryonics, like you freeze yourself or freeze your head with the hopes that in the future they'll be able to revive you and keep you alive forever. Transhumanism, insect suffering, AGI, eugenics, whole brain emulation, suffering subroutines, the cost effectiveness of having kids, polyamory, intelligence enhancing drugs, etc. Suffering subroutines, as far as I can tell, they're literally talking about operating systems, like software, and how certain processes cause suffering for the software, if I'm reading this correctly. I apologize, dear viewer, for what you're about to see. I just hit F4, and that window was terminated right before your eyes. I'll give you a second to emotionally process that, but let's continue. So as EA, as effective altruists engaged more deeply with the movement, they were encouraged to shift to AI risk. EA Hub published a guide, tips to help your conversation go well. Among the tips were use the person's interests. There was a preventing bait and switch, right? You don't want them to feel misled. This can feel like a bait and switch. They're baited with something they care about, and then the conversation is switched to another area. Why would people feel this way? Because literally that's what happened. One way of reducing this tension is to ensure you mention a wide range of global issues that EAs are interested in, even if you spend more time on one issue. So just sprinkle more bait on it. So to me, this whole EA thing kind of reads like a cult, but with some pyramid scheme parts attached, or at least just an outright scam, right? The goal is to get a few people to the core, not necessarily move people down the funnel, but just get a few people that are the zealots, the fanatics, to be the core people. And of course, the FTX collapse, the founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, he was part of EA. The people that orchestrated the OpenAI coup, they were part of EA. So it does seem like it's just a lot of these bait and switch tactics. And a lot of the money that was donated is flowing towards these organizations that are campaigning for AI safety. And that's why this debate about AI safety is so strange to follow, right? Because you have a nearly $1 billion donation made to the Future of Life Institute. Then that institute funds other existing AI existential risk organizations. So you kind of got to ask yourself, are these regulations being written for safety, for innovation, to further benefit to humanity, or is it a bait and switch? Is that the surface level cause and the underlying cause is more money, more control? I'm not downplaying AI safety. I think it is important. I just think that this whole thing is not helping. And AI safety is important. Here's Pliny the Prompter, who jailbreaks the brand new GPT-2 model. This was less than 24 hours after it got released. Yeah, I think it's the same day as it got released. Here it is giving you a chemistry lesson. So actually, here's the GPT-2 screenshot. So it looks like he broke that one. And this screenshot that I showed you was him using the memory feature to jailbreak ChatGPT. So this is regular ChatGPT, but using the jailbreak feature to install a permanent jailbreak. So that's it for today. What do you think? What is the GPT-2 model? Is it the next generation OpenAI model that they're kind of benchmarking, trying to kind of figure out how good it is, trying to get some user testing, and they're just kind of slow playing it? Could it be a much smaller model that is on GPT-4's level? Is it personality 2? And what do you think about the whole AI safety debate? EA, open source, California, etc. Let me know in the comments. My name is Wes Roth, and thank you for watching.